Yeah, it's another one of those kinds of not following along. So we are dealing with respect and hierarchy type of ideas again. Poor without being obsequious, wealthy without being arrogant. So this is a student. Okay, Tzu Kung would be a student of Confucius. A lot of this whole thing is just set up as question and answer. So with number 15, we just had one of the students asking about that humility, actually, in being rich or poor. So if you're arrogant, of course, it's not very humble. Obsequious, of course, not very humble. So he's just saying, well, what do you, master, what do you think of this? And he says, you know, that will do, as a saying. It's a good saying, the master says, that will do. But better still, poor yet delighting in the way, wealthy yet observant of the rights. Okay, now real quick, Friday we mentioned a bunch of other, that's it, a bunch of other Confucian, just religious books. One of them was the Book of the Rites, and of course that's just rituals, or, you know, stuff related to rituals. What were the other ones? Histories? Poetry. So there's a lot of different Confucius religious books, and they get mentioned throughout this one. So this is just a collection of wise sayings. Well, you have wise sayings about some of these other ones. So with number 15, we are talking about the rights, and we are also talking about delighting in the way. So we're dealing with honesty, we're dealing with truth, we're dealing with wisdom and knowledge, and humility does come into there. So after Confucius mentions that, delighting in the way is a better phrase than the non-arrogance thing. We have, you know, because what we're dealing with is this 415. People are talking about quotes from these. It's kind of like if you have a couple of different people talking about the Bible. It's kind of like that. One student asking another student about, let's say, the Bible. It's kind of the same thing we're looking at. They're talking about these because right after they mention the rights, they're talking about the odes. Well, the odes are a kind of poetry here. So the odes say, like bone cut, like horn polished, like jade carved, like stone ground, is not what you have said, a case in point. Okay? They're talking about, you know, shaping things, molding things, growing, which goes back to the stuff that, you know, we see on page 1 about, about the root, where we first have the way mentioned in verse 2. So we are just dealing with this thing here as well. So, which is also why the next thing that we're going to read is actually all about this, all about it. Let's see. So 15 ends with, tell such a man something, and he can see its relevance to what he has not been told. It's kind of the idea of really just saying, ask more questions. It's a roundabout way of saying it. And our roundabout way is a lot of it because of, we're looking at a translation. So, were there any other questions aside from 15? Or on 15, rather? Okay. The ancestors I asked you to kind of pay attention to. They get mentioned in 9, yes. But we have more stuff with family in 8 and 10 and 11. Okay, so in 11 we're dealing with, you know, a man's father and funeral stuff, funeral rites. So I was kind of wondering, what do you guys think about 8, 9, 10, 11? If we think about the stuff that happened in like Water for Chocolate. I know it was a long time ago already, but.
In which one?
Like Water for Chocolate?
No, but I want yours.
Oh, sorry, 8, 9, 10, and 11 on page page 2. Because we have all this different stuff with ancestors, which we talked about for a while with like Wonderful Chocolate. We have this honesty, you know, humility. Humility kind of as honesty, like being honest with yourself. Sorry? It couldn't hurt. I'd recommend it. Let's see here. Do you remember how I mentioned Mulan back when we were talking about like Wonderful Chocolate? In Mulan, they had the ancestors. Mushu comes out, and the grandmother was praying to them, and I forget what she was doing, but I think there was incense involved. So you see, kind of like down on, where did it go? Verse 9, we're dealing with sacrifices to ancestors. And again, it all comes back to these things here that we heard the communists were not quite for. And before we move on again, real quick, verse 12, what do you guys think of the use of harmony there? Of things brought by the rights, harmony is the most valuable. So there's that rights again. Any ideas of harmony? No?
What do you mean?
It's a good question. Well, what do you think?
I don't know. You mean, what do we think about harmony?
Right. If we say that things brought by the rites, let's say rites would be kind of like a religious ritual. So the religious rituals bring about kind of a harmony. Any ideas on harmony? Well, what is harmony?
Peace and stuff like that?
Yeah. Kind of like a peace thing, which, comes with honesty, comes with respect. We come with a really weird thing here, right? Harmony will not, in fact, work at the end. So we go back to honesty, trustworthiness in 13. And finally, being careful and watching your speech. More honesty in 14, until we get to all this discussion about the way, the truth, and whatever else is in there. Very complicated idea again. We're gonna see some really odd stuff with that. Are there any other ways you guys can think any of these sayings relate to what we looked at earlier, either like Wonderful Chocolate or any of the poems? Nothing?
There's one verse, I don't know where it's at though.
Okay.
It says something about the father and his son or something like that.
Yeah.